marriage.
All right, babe, this is the marriage minute, I guess, moment, whatever you want to call it. We're covering your book. What's the title of your book?
You can run in flip-flops, but is that the best way?
Yeah, and we were just recently at the camp in Ohio, and it was funny because that Saturday was actually National Flip-Flop Day, so we passed out a number of your books. All the books that we had. We didn't bring that many. And so hopefully people out there are enjoying it, but it was funny because it was National Flip-Flop Day. But anyway, what chapter are we on today?
So this one's called To the Suffering Women.
To the Suffering, is this a personal testimony? And no.
No, not exactly. But I feel like in life, suffering touches everybody at some point.
It does, right.
And in different degrees. I mean, we went through, like I talked about in the chapter, I talked about us going through the flood.
Going through the
And
flood.
we
That
saw
sounds like a song, right? We've gone through the flood. Did we go through the fire?
Well,
No. Well, the house was
had
part
a
of the
little fire, but
uh,
anyway. But I mean, when we went through the flood, we did see a lot of suffering, and there were people that, lost a lot. We lost a lot.
Right.
And, but it's like, how do you respond to pain? How do you respond to loss? How do you respond to the hard times?
Yeah. I mean, we've lost, how would you say, we had miscarriages and things that we had to, babies that we had to birth, and they obviously didn't make it. And there's pain, there's loss, there's suffering. This world is full of suffering. One of the reasons why my grandmother never got saved was because how could a God allow suffering in this world? And she could never understand that sin was the issue. And anyway, that was, so yeah, you're right. Suffering touches everyone.
It does. And I mean, the Bible.
And unfortunately, in marriage and stuff, men like to, not like to, but usually are the cause for a lot of suffering.
Yeah, they are. And
hey, wait, you're not supposed to agree with
okay.
that.
I mean, out there, some people.
Right.
No, but I feel like, that's kind of why I wrote this chapter is a lot of women point to their husbands for the cause of their suffering.
Right.
And they feel like it's unfair. They feel like, it's just too much for them to go through. And, the Bible does tell us that we're all going to suffer in this world. You'll have tribulation, you'll have suffering. And suffering actually is given to us to produce something in us.
Right.
And if we let it, instead of kicking and screaming and, complaining about it. And so, I mean, suffering is terrible, and it's terrible for wives out there whose husbands are, causing them to suffer.
Right. And specifically, I think in this book, that's what you're referring to somewhat.
Right.
Is not just suffering in general, even though that is part of it.
Yeah.
Like there's certain things that you can't control, and that is how a husband is treating you.
Right.
Or maybe other friends that are really close to you, and some of those are out of your control. But what can you do to handle it? You can handle what you can handle, and obviously the Lord is with us and brings us through these times. And there's a few reasons. We'll get back to your book in just a second, but there's a few reasons why God will maybe allow suffering. One is maybe to discipline, and the other one is to build character and to prove our faith, is to refine our faith. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, and
not to steal your show.
No, it's all good. But I guess my thought in writing this chapter was that so many women especially seem to be very spiritually minded.
Sure.
And they think of themselves as more spiritual, and then they can't handle that their husbands are treating them wrongly in whatever way, and they just can't handle the suffering. So they go and complain to other people, and many of them end up leaving and feel justified in their leaving because of all the pain and, turmoil that their husbands have put them through. And especially for Christian women, I feel like, we're going to face things that are difficult. And it's a shame if it's your Christian husband that maybe could be putting you through that. But whatever the case, we go through things, but we do have Christ. And so I feel like, Christian women, they'll be quick to say, oh, I would die for my faith. And I would, I'd give my life for the sake of the gospel. And I would, I'd go through torture. I'd go through all these things. And we say that, but yet we're not willing to put up with a husband who treats us the way that he does, and I just feel like, okay, so how is it that, you'd be willing to go give your life and, if God called you in the mission field, oh, I'd do that and I'd live in whatever kind of state. But then when your husband doesn't come home and say, oh, wow, you made a wonderful supper and you look beautiful today, then, we're not willing to deal with that.
I'm not loved, and, and I'm justified in being angry. And that's not the right attitude, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
And so, I doubt these women or men in general that complain can go through some of these things of true tribulation. Like some of the things that we hear women complain about are totally first world problems. I mean, we're just like, what are you talking about? Give me a break. There's people out there getting their brains beat in, and there's people who are being abused in terrible ways, especially outside of America. I'm not saying that there's not inside of America. There's abuse everywhere, but there are people who are actually being persecuted for their faith, and you can't even go through a little bit of suffering for this for God, because you made a commitment, a vow to someone, and you're searching your scriptures to get out. You're going to do the same thing when persecution comes. You're going to justify why you've compromised your faith, and because you don't like pain, and none of us like pain. I mean, come on. But you can say all those things about, I'm going to die for the gospel. I'm going to, when persecution comes, I will do this. Well, you're not practicing very well.
No.
And look, I get it. There is a time where a guy may be mistreating you in a very terrible way, and there's time to get help for that. And you may need to get people involved, and you may need to get the authorities involved. But man, do we understand the power of Christ, and that Christ can be with us? Do we truly understand what it means to have Christ with us, and that even when things don't go our way, and I think that's the biggest problem, it's not going our way. We were very selfish in that, and I don't think women are the only ones to deal with this, but when it's not going our way, how do we deal with it? And we're to be Christ-like, and Christ didn't give up. He didn't quit when people spit in his face, ripped his beard out, and beat him and hung him on a cross. He didn't quit. And he could have. He could have had the angels come down and take him. And he could have had a good reason, my goodness. But he suffered it for us. And that is our example as men specifically. But even women, they can have the example of Christ that, hey, we're gonna do the right thing. And if that means honor and obey our husbands, even when they don't do things the right way. Now, if they're doing things criminally, that's maybe a different story. But, come on, man. Some ladies just are really looking for excuses. But
pretty much. Yep. I'm going to start preaching now, huh?
Yeah, I know.
So pretty much that's the gist of the chapter. Is, where's your faith? Where's your hope? And if it's in Christ, then...
Is God big enough?
Yeah.
Right. Is God big enough? Be amazed at what God can do. And you don't know the end of the story. Right now, you may be going through a hard time, but you don't know 5 years from now where God's going to bring you and your husband, or you and a friend that you're struggling with right now, or a church, or, God. We heard someone one time, he was a comedian, but he had a message, and he's like, in 24 hours, things can change, and you just don't know when that could happen. And it is amazing. When God's involved, things can change. Yep. So anyway, if you want to go pick up a book, we'll put the link up here. It's on Amazon. Just let us know. You can follow along and read the book, and go help Sarah out, man.